Tonight, let's turn to James chapter 4. James chapter 4 and verse 11. Good to see everybody here tonight. I know we have a lot that are out, and prayerfully they will be back with us next week. James chapter 4. In James chapter 4 and verse beginning with 11, James says, "Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. He who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another? Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there, and buy and sell and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin." James here in chapter 4, verse 11 is continuing, believe it or not, continuing his ideas about the tongue. Now, if you remember back in chapter 2 and also in chapter 3, the Bible was dealing with the tongue, especially chapter 3. But if you go back and look at it, you'll see that it's a continuation of that. And also, if you wanted to make a title for this, it might be The Pitfalls of the Proud. The Pitfalls of the Proud. In James chapter 4, in verse 6, if you remember going back to our previous lesson, the Bible says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And so God resists. None of us want God to resist us. And so we need to get rid of our pride and ask for humility. God resists those that are proud, but He gives grace to the humble. And so here in verse 11, which is really where we're going to take up tonight, it says, "Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. He who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge." In just a few minutes, we're going to talk a little bit more about this passage that says, "Do not speak evil of one another, brethren." Apparently, he's talking to his brethren. Again, if you can remember back to James chapter 1 and verse 1, he's speaking to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. Now, that doesn't mean the 12 tribes of Israel literally, but spiritually. Those Jewish brethren that were converted on the day of Pentecost, the 3,000, and then later the 5,000, and more thousands and thousands later in Jerusalem, and those that later had gone around in the diaspora, or the persecution and the spreading. Diaspora is the scattering of those Christians because of the persecutions. And so when the Bible says, "Do not speak evil of one another," we need to be really careful how we approach this passage, because if you're not careful, you might kind of take it in too big of a sweep. Or it's not saying don't talk about your neighbor. It's saying don't talk about somebody, and I'll explain that what I mean in a minute. But it says, "Do not speak evil." Speak evil. Well, that sounds like something God would say, right? Don't speak evil of others. And so when he says speaking evil, another version says speak badly. Don't speak badly. We don't like people to speak badly about us, right? You know what that means. Some people can do it verbally, and some people can be non-verbally. You know how he is, him. We have that wink and a nod. If you look at the idea of evil or badly, I've written down some of the things that it could be. He doesn't say that here. But if you look at the idea of evil in the context of the New Testament, how about backbiting? Would that be speaking evil of somebody? I think so. We kind of know what backbiting is. I don't know if that's an English term, but it's the idea of chewing on the back, on someone's back side or behind their back, talking behind their back in a bad way, in a bad light. And so that is something that is not approved of or condoned. We are not to speak badly of somebody. Now, that doesn't mean you can't judge them. Now, we'll get into that in just a few minutes. It could also be the idea of blackmailing. We know what blackmailing is. When you kind of manipulate somebody to do what you want them to do because you have some kind of leverage, that could be part of it. It could also be lying. At times, speaking evil can include lying, saying things that you don't know that are true. You may think they are true. It may be your opinion that it's true, but you don't have the facts. And so it could be shading the truth, and I call that lying. How about gossiping? Would speaking evil include gossiping? Now, we know what gossip is without going into it, right? We know what gossip is. Gossip is passing on something from one person to another, and generally, it's not good. There's nothing wrong with passing on good things, is there? No problem. So-and-so graduated, so-and-so got a new job, so-and-so got a new car. I mean, that's not gossip, is it? It's things, gossip are things that are shouldn't be passed on. It's things that shouldn't be said, and many times you don't even know if those are true either. How about slander? And I ended up with the word slander because that really is, in this context, what James is talking about. Do not slander, do not speak evil, do not slander one another. Now, you know what slander is? It's like slamming, right? I mean, that's the way I put it. You're slamming the person. You're slandering. You're putting them down in ways that are not truthful. It may be lying. It may be blackmailing. It may be gossiping. It's all of those things, but it is slandering a person, in some way denigrating, that is making their name black before others. And so when you look at it there, do not speak evil of one another, brethren. Don't speak badly against others. Now that's a common pitfall that maybe all of us from time to time can fall into. And it says, he who speaks the evil of a brother, there it is again, he who speaks evil, he who speaks slander or gossip or backbiting of a brother and judges his brother, there's the word, speaks evil of the law and judges the law. Now I don't believe that James here is saying that we should not judge, because there are times when we should judge. But when is it that we should not judge? Matthew 7 says, judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. But Luke goes on to talk about judging righteous judgment. We know that leaders and elders and parents, you have to judge, right? I mean, if you don't, you're in trouble, right? And so the best way that I can put this, that I can figure out, is that when we judge, how would you like to be judged? By God. I want all the mercy I can get. I want all the grace that He has to give me. I want all the benefit of the doubt. I want Him to judge my intentions and not what I actually do, because sometimes what I actually do is not what I intended on doing, and what I intended on saying is definitely not what comes out sometimes. You know what I mean by that? So I probably all of us want to be judged fairly. And that's what he's saying here, is don't judge your brother unfairly. Not saying that you don't have a set of facts and you're able to evaluate in a very objective way over a period of time and come to a logical conclusion, which that is different. And so I would say that judging that the Bible speaks against is something that is done quickly, something that is done without having the facts, something that is not done in a careful and objective way. We know in Corinthians there was an immoral group of people there, and Paul talked about leavening out the bad leaven and those that were immoral, not living with your father's wife, and all kinds of things that maybe could have happened at the church at Corinth. And so Paul made a judgment about that. And about certain people, he even says not to eat with them. And so there is judgment involved in all of life. But I think really what he's saying is don't judge quickly. Would you like to be judged quickly? We do that. We call it snap judgments. Made a snap judgment. We need to be careful about snap judgments, about the way someone says something or does something or acts. It may not be any truth in it at all. It may just be something that you arrived at an opinion. So here he says, don't speak evil of a brother and don't judge a brother, because if you do, you speak evil of the law. And so, for example, my brother celebrates a holy day. My brother celebrates a holy day. Well, what does that mean? Did Paul not talk to the church at Corinth and others about following your conscience? Well, yes. About if someone has meat offered to an idol, eat it, and unless it's a problem for somebody, him or you, go ahead. And so there are things that we might say, well, so-and-so celebrates, Easter eggs. Easter's coming up. Is that wrong? Well, according to the Bible, I can't see that there's anything sinful about coloring an Easter egg and hiding it somewhere, or Christmas, or whatever the day may be. And so we need to be careful what it's saying here in other places about making that kind of quick snap judgments and judging others' motives, much less their actions, if you're not totally aware of the circumstances and the facts and careful. And sometimes people judge for power. Sometimes people judge for status. Sometimes people judge, if I can judge you, then I have a certain power over you because I'm judging you. And so that elevates me in my sight and maybe in the sight of others. And so it's easy for us to say something bad about someone else, and we struggle at times with our thoughts and possibly even with our actions, what we say and what we do. And as I said, I judge you, making myself look and feel better before others. So how do you overcome this? Well, in James chapter 4, the previous verse that we studied last week, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up. Well, if we're humble and we're careful in our humility, people that are humble don't usually go around in a prideful way, pointing at others and judging them quickly and judging them wrongly and speaking evil of each other. And so humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up. So in other words, He's going back to pride here. So pride is really the reason behind many of our problems and many of our failings, and that was much of the problem with Satan in the world when he was visibly more active in even the Old Testament. And so tonight we're going to look very quickly at three areas where our pride causes us to not live and fail to live a godly life. And the first one is in the two verses that we're looking at. The first one would be pride in our speech. Pride in our speech. Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. He who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother, holds himself as a judge over that brother, speaks evil of the law and judges the law. And so God said, if you speak evil of a brother, you judge your brother, you speak evil of the law and judge the law. Well, how is that? It is because you're using the law of God to judge yourself to be okay, and the other to not be. A judge of another person many times is judging the external and maybe even the motives of another. And so you are judging God's law that has told us that we are to be careful in our judgments. Yes, judge righteous judgment. But the older I get, the more I realize that probably righteous judgment is a very careful analysis of the facts. 1 + 1 is 2, but it's not always exactly 2. Sometimes there are areas that we don't know about, that when we were younger, we might judge something in open and shut case, and when we get older, we might say, well, I don't know about that. And so we need to be careful that we don't judge and especially condemn someone else to the fiery lake of hell because they don't see things like we do, or don't act like we do, or have the opinion that we have. And so many times we are ignoring God's commands and God's laws. For example, the law of loving your neighbor. Well, I'm not just bringing that up. Look at chapter 2 and verse 8. It's the royal law to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the basis of judgment, is to love your neighbor as yourself. It is the golden rule. It is the royal law. And you know what? Talking in terms, and we're looking at the idea of slander and speaking evil, you cannot love a person and slander them at the same time, can you? I don't think you can do that. Now, you can judge a person, but you can't slander them. Because slander comes from malice and evil thinking and thinking the worst, and many times very quick judgment. And so James says, if we were to say it today, mind your tongue. Don't break God's royal law, or you're judging the very law of God that was given. And we're deciding if God's law is right or God's law is good. And there's only one lawgiver, he says. There's only one judge. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. And so don't talk, and don't judge only. And so that one lawgiver, verse 12, there's one lawgiver. That's a capital L. It could be talking about Moses' law. Could be the New Testament law, but there is one lawgiver. That means the laws of God, who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge your neighbor, your brother, as saved or lost based on what you think? Now, I don't know. I don't have a list of all of those that are going to be in heaven. I have no idea. I mean, I have some ideas, but I don't know what the roll is. I don't know what the list is. I know there's a book there that I want my name to be in that book. And so if you go back to Matthew chapter 7, when it talks about judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. It's saying be careful about the beam in your eye, because you're going around trying to get the little speck out of your neighbor's eye. And so that's a parallel passage here to James chapter 4, that there's one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Are you able to save or to destroy your fellow brother or a fellow citizen? But here's talking about brethren. Who are you to judge another? And that's a pretty strong statement. Who are we to judge another's salvation or not? Now, I understand the Bible talks about, yes, Mark 16 and Matthew 28, verse 18 through 20, and go into all the world and preach the gospel, baptize them. But I don't know that everybody that's baptized is going to be saved. Do you? Don't think so. There's a lot of people that baptize for the wrong reasons. There's a lot of people that are baptized and don't stay faithful. And I'm not the judge of that. And that person that is the lawgiver and judge is not you. And it's not me, but it is God. Only God is able to give his law, and only God is able to judge with righteous, really, truly righteous judgment, whether one is saved or lost. And so the point is, don't speak evil of one another. Don't put down one another in a slanderous way. He who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother in some way like that speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law, you're a judge. And there's only one lawgiver who is able to save and destroy. Who are you that are able to judge, or who are you to judge one another? You're not superior to others, and so quit judging. Don't talk. And then number 2 is verse 13 and 14. The second part about pride is pride in our plans. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. The Bible doesn't condemn making plans, does it? Jesus, I'm sure, planned to go to the cross. God made plans for the church before the foundation of the world. The Bible does not condemn planning, but the Bible condemns presumptuous planning. The Bible condemns pride in having plans that we think is in our control and our control only. Many times we think we can control what will happen to us, and we would like to be the God of our lives and the one that controls our lives, but we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. Can someone tell me what's going to happen tomorrow? We think that the sun's going to come up sometime around 6-ish or so, did today. But we don't know that. And so we make grand plans for tomorrow. Do you have plans for tomorrow? I have in the morning a long meeting to plan the Future Preachers Training Camp in July for hours, talking about everything related to those plans. But I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I could wake up and hopefully not have flu or COVID again. That happens to people. We just don't know, do we? Someone said, and I don't believe he was a Christian that said it, you want to make God laugh, you know the rest of it, right? Tell him your plans. How many times have we made plans and look back, whether it's about our life or our wife or family or vacation, and our plans were all messed up by the time we actually were able to execute the plans. You want to make God laugh? Tell him your plans. It is wrong, James says, to assume that you have a tomorrow. We assume that we're going to have a tomorrow because there's a today, and that is a wrong assumption for a Christian. Because we don't have anything beyond the very few minutes and seconds that exists right now. There's one small change that can happen today or tomorrow in our work, or a phone call that we receive from a family member, and we know what it means. Nothing went according to schedule that I planned. It was all changed. And so he's trying to say here and says, well, don't be arrogant with God. There's a reminder here that God says that your life is just a mist. We are physical beings and creations that walk and all, but the Bible says that we're like a flower, we're like a mist. The New King James says a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. And thinking anything more than that is prideful thinking. As we get older, we understand even more and more every day the fragility of life. Life is here and gone today. Just a short call from now, we learn of a relative that passed away that we didn't know was even sick. A small sickness or a disease in your whole life is changed in the blink of an eye. And so James says, don't assume that you're going to have a tomorrow. That's the whole case that the book of Acts and Paul and Peter and Jesus made for today is the day of salvation. We don't even know if there's a tomorrow. We don't know if there's a next week or a next month or next year. We assume that, but that's a wrong assumption to make. And so, pride in our plans. And then the third prideful thing that James points to is the actual idea of pride in pride. Being proud about our pride. Chapter 4, verses 15 through 17, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast, prideful, you boast in your arrogance, prideful. All such boasting, prideful, is what? The Bible says it's evil. So just as you look back at verse 11, do not speak evil of another, of a brother, or others, it says here, that all such prideful thinking and boasting is evil. You boast in your arrogance. You're proud of your plans and you boast about your plans. Look what we planned and look like what we're going to do. And this speaks to me because I love to plan. I really do. I don't like surprises. I prefer to plan it all from A to Z and Z to A and back and forth. That's just the way I am. And my trips to Brazil, everything is planned. And I've done it I know it's not going to go that way. But I start out with a plan, and I'm able to execute plan A, B, C, and D, and E sometimes based on that. There's nothing wrong with planning. But when you are so prideful of your plans and boast, look what we're going to do, and not include God in those plans, not pray about your plans, not ask God's blessings on your plans. But you should say, if the Lord wills, and that's what I say, pray about it. These are my plans, God. With your authority, bless these. And if not, help me to live with whatever happens. That makes for a more peaceful and content disciple of Christ. And so we need to be thinking about God's will in our lives every day and not our own. And stop assuming that we will have more life and more days and more health, because those things are not granted always and not guaranteed, and only God knows. And so the author of James, says that we're to be careful about having pride and arrogance in our pride. And so the question tonight is, have we surrendered this year to God? We made plans as a congregation and monthly, and special plans for meals every month. We have plans for this year, where we're going to go and what we're going to do with work and vacation and family, but have we surrendered that to God? Have we taken it to God and said, God, these are my plans. If it be your will, if the Lord wills, would you please bless that? And let God be part of that. Are we thanking God for this day and for this hour and for this minute and for this breath? And I mean that literally, for this breath, because we don't know if we'll have another. Where are we in relationship to God? Are we in control of our life? Are we arrogant, or are we giving our life to Him? The Bible says that Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God does not change, but our plans will. And we need to ask for His assistance in those plans. And so tonight, maybe it's a shorter lesson, but be careful about speaking evil of one another. Be careful about pride in our plans and pride in our pride in our speech, speaking evil and slandering. Some people don't believe they slander others, but when you talk badly in a way about others, then that is slander. If it's not based on facts and judgment and careful judgment. Tonight, if in any way we can help you, please come as we stand.